We know death and taxes are certain. You may not know, though, that so is the U.S. Census. The Constitution tells us to count ourselves every 10 years. But, as Chip Reed tells us, COVID-19 makes that infinitely more difficult.
This is Tooksuk Bay, Alaska, on the Bering Sea, about as far away from it all as you can get and still be in the United States. And this is Stephen Dillingham, director of the U.S. Census Bureau, who flew in on a frigid January day to count the very first person in our nation's 2020 census, the constitutionally mandated, once a decade, count of every single person within our borders.
The 2020 census has begun. It was very emotional to me. The entire village had gathered. They were playing native music. They were celebrating the 2020 census, and I just hope we can replicate that across the nation.
It seems Stephen Dillingham is not alone in his passion for the census.
How much do you know about the census?
Not much.
Okay.
In February, we traveled to Houston, Texas, where activists went door to door to make sure their communities will be fully counted.
Some people are very happy to see us. Some people don't even open the door.
Belai Andargi says many people have no idea how important the census is. Not only does it determine how many votes each state gets in Congress, but also how trillions of federal dollars will be divvied up over the next decade.
They need to know the benefits, the school lunches, the road construction, and the parks, the health care.
Where does the census rank on your list of priorities? And it's a long list.
It's pretty much near the very top.
Judge Lina Hidalgo is the executive of Harris County, the largest county in Texas, which includes Houston, the nation's most diverse big city.
For every person who doesn't respond to the census, we lose around $1,000.
Hidalgo says in the 2010 census, Latinos, especially immigrants, were significantly undercounted. One of the biggest challenges in 2020, she says, is fear.
There was a fight about whether the census would include a citizenship question. So folks who are seeing on TV, families being torn apart who perhaps know somebody who's been deported are now afraid that the census is going to ask them whether or not they're U.S. citizens.
Last year, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected a Trump administration proposal for the census to demand everyone's citizenship status. But Hidalgo says the damage is already done.
The community's heard so much about it that we're now having to debunk the myth that it is part of the census.
You might be surprised by just how long the idea of a census has been around.
The census comes up again and again in the Old Testament.
In A New History of the Census, author Andrew Whitby cites the example of Exodus, when Moses ordered a count of all males aged 20 and older.
Behold his mighty hand!
The census plays a major role in the New Testament, too.
Mary and Joseph were from Nazareth, up in the north, but Jesus was born in Bethlehem, about 100 miles away. Why did they go to Bethlehem?
The ostensible reason in the Bible is that there was a Roman census called, that Caesar Augustus had called had decreed that there should be a census of the entire Roman world.
The first U.S. census was carried out in 1790, 1 year after George Washington was sworn in as president. In less than 100 years, the population had increased tenfold, and Herman Hollerith invented an electric tabulating machine to count all those people. And in case you didn't know, Hollerith's 19th century startup business became
IBM.
IBM.
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that the census has actually played a role in the invention or development of the computer?
Yeah, I would say that.
Score one for the census. And it's a good thing Hollerith came along because, as the late Richard Threlkeld explained on Sunday Morning 40 years ago,
in 1890, Americans had to answer 470 questions, including one that wanted to know if there were any idiots in the family.
Lucky for us, today there are just 9 basic questions. Yet the very simplicity and importance of the census have recently tempted politicians to disguise fundraising appeals as census forms, including these from the Republican National Committee and the Trump campaign.
The census is a public treasure. It is our collective information. And so for some organization, in this case the Republican National Committee and the later President Trump's campaign committee, to try to hijack this nonpartisan public trust in the census for personal political gain is wrong.
California Democratic Congresswoman Katie Porter sits on the committee that oversees the Census Bureau. In February, she confronted Census Director Stephen Dillingham.
Have you asked the RNC to cease and desist from using the term 2020 census or official census in its mailings?
Congresswoman, I would have to look and see. I'm not sure who sent that out. And
you're going to hold Mr. Dillingham's feet to the fire on that?
100%. Whether you're a political appointee or not, you take on the job. It's the exact same thing for the director of the Centers for Disease Control. It's the same thing for the director of the census. You made a commitment to the American people.
Or do you feel pressure from this White House and the Republican Party to do this count in a way that they would like?
No, I do not.
And soon after our interview, the RNC promised to stop using the word census in its mailings, and Facebook has dropped the Trump ads. The coronavirus, of course, poses an entirely different and unprecedented challenge to the census. The Census Bureau encourages Americans to fill out the census online, and they report that close to 1/3 of households have already responded. Pandemic or not, Steve Dillingham says the work of the Census Bureau is going forward.
Hello. Hi there.
Bottom line, your messages respond online, on the phone, or by mail, and then we won't come knocking on your door.
Absolutely. And that's the message we hope it will resonate with everyone.